Hello, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. We are delighted to welcome all of you to this very special event. I think we will be, I'm looking through the Zoom screen. We have a wonderful array of participants, truly reflective of the lifelong fellowship, the global lifelong fellowship that is the Rhodes Scholarship. And we will have scholars in our audience from the class, ranging from the class of 1955, and I'm talking about you, John Morrison, I can see you, to, hello, to quite a number of the members of the class of 2020. So a wonderful gathering of our lifelong fellowship for a very, very special conversation about medicine and humanity. And we are really honored and delighted and excited to welcome Dr. Samuel Shem, AKA Steve Bergman, Massachusetts and Balliol, 1966, as our very, very special guest this evening. And Dr. Shem will be in conversation with Dr. Romina Mariano. And so I will be introducing Romina now, and then we'll turn the podium, the Zoom podium, over to her. So Dr. Romina Mariano is South Africa at Large and Queens 2016. She is a clinician scientist who's passionate about neuroscience and mental health. And we're all very excited that she recently submitted her DPhil. So she has completed her DPhil, just submitted it in the last month or so. She is also was one of our inaugural scholar program facilitators at Rhodes House, and I'm very pleased that we've been able to engage her now for a 6 to 12 month stint as a strategic projects associate as well. She is a medical doctor from Johannesburg, and she shared that during her first year as a medical intern in Joburg, she was told by a senior doctor on the ward, "You cannot be a successful medical intern unless you have read The House of God." And so I will now turn it over to Dr. Romina Mariano, who will introduce Samuel Shem, author of The House of God. Romina.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Before I do that, I just want to, just a few house rules is just to ask everyone to stay on mute until we get to the question and answer session. At that time, please feel free to ask questions directly, or because it's being recorded, if you'd rather not be on video, you can use the chat function and I will ask the question on your behalf. And the final note is that if you would like to see the live transcript, the link will be in the chat and you can access it that way. And now, finally, it is an honor to formally introduce our guest for this session, Samuel Shem, who is a novelist, playwright, and activist. He was educated at Harvard, Pi Beta Kappa, is a Rhodes Scholar and did his DPhil in Oxford, then went on to Harvard Medical School, and is currently a Professor of Medicine in Medical Humanities at NYU School of Medicine. Very excitingly, in 2020, he published Man's Fourth Best Hospital, which is the sequel to The House of God. And Dr. Sanjay Gupta reviewed this and said, "Shem has done it again. Man's Fourth is an instant classic. You may get annoyed, double over in laughter, and even cry a little. If you read one medical drama, make it this one." And I can say I completely agree with that. In 2020, The House of God was on the Washington Post list of 12 novels that have changed our lives. And Shem was the only living author. And in 2016, it was listed as one of the 10 best satires of all time. And finally, in 2019, an MD Links vote by doctors rated The House #1 as one of the 10 most influential books. Second to that, Harrison's Internal Medicine, and #3, the Bible. So that's how doctors ranked The House of God. His other novel, The Spirit of the Place, is a winner of 2 American National Best Novel Awards. And he's also written Mount Misery and At the Heart of the Universe. And finally, with his partner, Dr. Janet Surrey, has written the award-winning off-Broadway play, Bill W. and Dr. Bob, on the founding of Alcoholics Anonymous, a novel, The Buddha's Wife, and a non-fiction book, We Have to Talk, Healing Dialogues Between Women and Men. And he's also written a classic essay, Fiction as Resistance, and has been a scholar artist at the American Academy of Rome. So after all that, it is such an honor to be here tonight. And to kick us off, we're going to start close to home and start off with the question about Oxford. You've written that if it weren't for the Rhodes, you wouldn't have become a writer. How did you end up in Oxford on the Rhodes, and what happened during your time in Oxford that led to that realization?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, Romina. I'm just absolutely delighted to be here, and I am just so grateful that the women have now really established themselves as, I think, the majority every year of Rhodes Scholars that are selected. I think it's absolutely terrific. We only had men, and almost all only white men, and it just shows by what you're looking for and what these people do in the world. I'm just thrilled. I'm thrilled and thrilled to be speaking here. I'm best known for the House of God, as you know, and you think that kind of it's okay to say I wrote the book, but even now, fairly recently, our daughter had a play date with, or no, had a supper for adults at her school, and I was wandering around looking for someone to talk with. And I heard that there were these two women, and they were talking about medicine. Turns out they were doctors. So I went a little closer and I said, I heard that it was at the Beth Israel Hospital. They're doctors, which is my alma mater, the House of God. So I sat down and said, I may not be the most favorite doctor at the Beth Israel Hospital. And one of them looked at me and she said, you can't be as bad as that guy that wrote that book, And there was this silence, and I said, "Do I tell her or don't I tell her?" And I said, "Okay, yeah, well, I am the guy that wrote that book." And then she blushed bright red, and that was the last play date our daughter had with her daughter. So now it's safe. Actually, now it's safe. The main thing I've living with and understanding in my later years now is that we think we have some control over what's going, what we're going to do and all of that stuff, but it's as fragile as the way a butterfly's wing goes one way or the other. We don't know the forces that are acting upon us. So in terms of my getting the Rhodes, it's, how can I make this simple? I was desperately in love with my now wife, but with Janet Surrey. We were both at Harvard, and we were planning to get married. And I would go to Harvard Med, and she would go to Harvard Psychology, and it'd be a nice little thing. And if I hadn't gotten the Rhodes, that never would have happened, because I went all the way over, and we broke up for a long time. And I would be now, I think, at best, a divorced alcoholic neurosurgeon on the faculty at Harvard Medical School, right? I mean, that's how much this changed me. So how did I get to the Rhodes? I wanted to be a writer when I went to Harvard, and in the first creative writing thing that everybody had to take, I worked like hell, and I handed in my paper and got it back, and there was no mark on it except down at the bottom, "See me." Okay, so I went to see her. I think she wanted to congratulate me. That's how swollen my head was then. And this is the first feedback to me from this great institution. And she said, quote, this paper is below F. Right. And I said, wow, that's pretty low, and I wanted to be a writer. And I had tears in my eyes, and so she tried to tell me what to do, and I tried to answer. But anyway, she made a very distinct impression. You can be a lot of things, you can't be a writer. Okay. So I did my pre-med, and I was going to go to Harvard Med, as I said. But I was doing this research on memory, brains and memory at Mass General and stuff, very into it. And I thought, well, I really want to keep going on this. I want to go. And so they said, well, Rhodes Scholar, why don't you try for a Rhodes Scholarship? So, I didn't really tell her I was doing this. And it was in Boston, and I was from Harvard. So it was a very difficult thing to get. I thought I didn't have a chance. When they came down the stairs and they said my name, that I was going to Oxford as a Rhodes from Massachusetts, I think I can say this on this. What went through, two words that went through my mind was, oh shit, because I knew this was absolute gonna, how could this continue, this first big love affair? Anyway, I arrived and we broke up. I was very depressed. We got to Oxford, and I was involved, and I met this wonderful teacher, Dennis Noble, at Balliol. He's a physiologist, wonderful, wonderful man. I'm in very good touch with him now, even. And I started doing a DPhil, teaching cockroaches how to lift their legs. Okay, talking about learning, the biological basis of learning. It was so stupid. And but it was the 60s. And we were wild. It was the first time I'd been outside of the United States. And we Americans were seeing the Vietnam War and all of the assassinations from a different vantage point. And the whole world was behind us. All of a sudden, it was a bigger world. And it was a moment when I and most of the people there took political action. We got to be activists. And all through college, we had been activists, some of us like me too, for civil rights and the Vietnam War. And what we learned and was confirmed at Oxford, like when LBJ didn't run again, what was confirmed is that if we stuck together and took action, we could get kind of what we want. And there was proof. We helped put the Voting Rights Acts on the books, and we ended eventually the Vietnam War. So it changed me from someone who was really quite ignorant about that stuff. I was a scientist, not a humanist even. And I joined up and I did all the, the protesting and everything that people were doing. And I started to write. I figured she can't get me here. It's 3,000 miles away, And then came the big crunch after 3 years, almost 3 years on the roads. I was writing away, and I was hating, and I didn't want to continue with my PhD really, but Dennis was such a wonderful guy, I couldn't let go. So I took a trip. We did a road trip, friend and me, to Morocco. We drove as far as we could in a car from here and ended at the Sahara Desert, the start of the dunes of the Sahara Desert. And I had this incredible, mystical, fueled by a little bit by Keith thing. And I came back and I decided I didn't want to do the DPhil. However, I had sort of been sociopathic. I said, the reason I can't do the DPhil anymore is because I need a computer, which was not true. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. They didn't have computers in 1969, but they had something like them. Came back to Oxford, walked into the lab. There are these boxes of the computer. It had come. I got a piece of, I went to the market and got something to eat for Dennis, and I went over to Holywell Manor, where he was prefectus. And I knocked on the door. I had to tell him, and I had a jalabi, big Florida, big thing they wear in Morocco, a month-long beard. And he said, oh, hi, how are you? Come on in. And Dennis, I said, I've got something to do. I've got something to tell you. I said, I'm not going to be a scientist. I want to be a writer. And my heart was in my throat. And he said, well then, Bergman, have a sherry. And, we went on, and I spent the rest of the time. So, I came back with resistance to injustice in my blood. So when I went back to medical school, I really found ways to write going through medical school. I came back to Oxford every summer pretending I was finishing my thesis, and eventually I did. And then I didn't know what, well, two things happened then. I got a call from my draft board in the year to report for war for Vietnam. So, I mean, I had the possibility of going to Harvard Med. I said, do I want to go to Vietnam or Harvard Med? And that's an easy one. And I thought somehow I will find a way to write. And I had a really smart thought. I realized that if I wrote for money, I couldn't write what I wanted. So I had to find something in medicine, which is very broad, that I could find time to write and make a living. And lo and behold, I discovered psychiatry. And I said, oh, okay, write in the mornings, go see patients in the afternoon, right? And I did that for 20 years, and that was that. But that's a long answer to a short question. I started writing, and if any of those steps had fallen through, I would not be a writer. And, what I was writing before wasn't very good. But when I went into the house of God, the Beth Israel Hospital, all of a sudden, it all crystallized. And I started writing after we finished that, why I write is to, number one, call attention to injustice, which is what I saw in medicine then, horrible injustice. And number two, the healing power, the danger of isolation, and the healing power of good connection. What's good connection? A good connection is a mutual connection. If it's not mutual, it's not that good. So without Oxford, no author. It's absolutely amazing.
No, that's incredible. And it's good to know that I wasn't the only one that felt that way about my DPhil. I think we all share a little bit of that experience during the process of wondering if we're going to make it to the end. But I'm very glad that you experienced all of that to bring you to this point. There was a panel discussion recently to mark the 40th anniversary of the House of God, which included all of your colleagues that inspired each of the characters. I will post the link in the chat in case anyone hasn't seen it, because it's absolutely wonderful. But I think so much of that was new to me, and I hadn't really seen all of these characters as real people. And so I wondered, how did the writing of this book happen, and what happened next to make you write Mount Misery? How did that all come to pass after you had witnessed the injustice?
Well, once again, I got lucky. Or the gods got lucky, wanted me to get lucky or something, because I wanted to write plays. I was writing plays. That's what I wanted to do, theater. And after the internship was over, it was so horrible that afterwards, the guys who were, they were all guys in those days, the guys who were around in Boston still, I started my psychiatric internship or residency. We got together, we drank, we smoked, we did everything, and we just laughed and laughed and laughed. It was an incredible catharsis of the worst year of my life, because almost everything, I didn't know you're supposed to disguise things, almost everything described in that book happened. People don't believe it, but I didn't. I didn't make too much up. I put it together. But we got together and we had these long drunken things, you know, trying to figure out what the hell we'd done. And I wrote it down. I wrote it down. I taped some of it too. And I wanted to get a play agent in New York. So I asked somebody at McLean Hospital, you know, a play agent. Said, oh yeah, write this woman. So I wrote this woman and I said, P.S. I've got a piece of a doctor novel, you know. And she wrote back, she says, I don't do plays, but why don't you send me what you got for your doctor novel? Well, what I had was single spaced on a typewriter, you know, cigar ash, you know, rings of drinks, beer, this, that, and the other. It was awful. So I sent this mess to her. I forgot about it. It didn't matter to me. I was there for the catharsis, you know, not for to write a novel. I didn't want to write a novel. And I'm doing my psychiatry in a big mental institution, McLean. And one day I'm in the office of the secretaries and the phone rings and it says it's so-and-so. And I'd even forgotten her name, but I got on the phone and this is the first feedback on this mess, you know, that turned into the House of God. And she said, quote, I don't know if you're a madman or a genius, but I really like what you sent me. And I actually had one of those rare times you get the right thing to say. I say, well, I can't help you there, but I'm speaking to you from within a big mental institution at this time. And there it was, you know, and then 7 verses later, 7 rewrites later. And I was hated. I was really, really hated by the people, the older people, especially the Harvard people. I was on the faculty when it came out as a psychiatrist. And it was absolutely beloved by my generation. No one had ever written this in this way. And I was really kind of lucky in another way. I had it was so bad. I mean, the stuff this isn't the worst, some of it. It was so bad that in order for someone to want to read it, it would have to ride on humor. Just like God said, it has to ride on humor, the way we got through it on humor. And so it went. It just flew out of the stores. Now, and then I did another smart thing, I think. I refused all appearances. I thought that real doctors don't go and tout their wares. You know, I was a real idealist. That was the other thing I started at Oxford. I was a scientist until then. I started reading and reading and reading and reading. You know, I had time all of a sudden. I sort of forgot where I was going with that. Anybody remember?
Where you're going? You were talking about your appearances, that you weren't making appearances.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that it had to. Oh, I know what I was saying. I didn't make any appearances for 2 years. One day, there was no internet, of course. One day I got a letter through my publisher, opened it up. It said, I'm on call all night long in a VA hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And if it weren't for your book, I'd kill myself. I said, wow, you know. And from that day, I said, maybe they want to hear what I have to say. From that time on, if I got a, you know, okay invitation, I've gone. I rarely said no. I didn't care if I got paid or whatever. And I've been on, you know, what is it, every continent that's not iced over, you know. And for a long time, I just have to say, well, anyway, for a long time, I wasn't very kosher, but now it seems I am. So I just want to, but it took me a little longer to put it all together to realize what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing really, but I had to because I was going out. And so I always was talking about these, hey, wait a second moments. Something is wrong here. Somebody has to write about it. I guess it's me. And then, of course, it got to be what I always talk about, how to stay human in healthcare, which is we're doing now, how to stay human in healthcare, the danger of isolation and the healing power of good connection. What's good connection? Good connection's mutual connection. And that's been my life all along. And it's been and for better or worse, and I don't think it's so popular now in how modern novels are built. For better or worse, there is always this fire that I start with, like the new one about COVID, that's set in COVID. There's this fire that starts with it and say, hey, somebody's got to write about it. It's you. So it's been quite a ride. And from vilification to, oh my God, it's Shem. How are we doing for time? Because I'm a little long-winded, I'm afraid.
No, we're good. I'm keeping my eye on it. Don't worry. I'll make sure we get through all our talking points.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that. No, I mean, it's incredible how I read the book basically, 35 years after it came out during my internship, and so much of it was still relevant because I think, the way you describe personal experience and just the human in the book, that's not isolated to a specific era. That's really transcendent. In fact, I was privileged when you shared with me a chapter of a book by Nathan Carlin, a professor of humanities at the University of Texas, and that will be published. And in his chapter about you, he calls your work almost prophetic. And to quote him, and leading on from what you've been saying, he said, Shem has a strong anti-authoritarian streak that came to be informed by the 1960s and feminist relational theory. These moral, spiritual, and religious commitments became embedded in his fiction, embodying two meanings of prophecy, existential prognosis and moral critique. Shem is speaking truth to power. He describes his writing as resistance. So I think this feels like actually someone's really captured quite an accurate description of what you feel has motivated you. Do you think that's what you were trying to get across?
Yeah, I was, Nathan is, you mentioned, he sent me this. He's been interested in my work recently, and we've become friends. And he got it just right. Nobody has ever gotten Shem right. First of all, they thought I was just a, kind of a popular writer, and I got tagged with that, and then all of a sudden it became a classic. So I'm still tagged as I have trouble getting other kinds of novels published. I've published a number of them. I think he got it just right, which is he's talking about what I said in other words, that almost all fiction writers aren't proselytizing anything, or aren't taking the moral value into it, or the justice. Justice is more important for me in that way. And it's what nonfiction writers do, and even now fiction very often, is sticking as tight to the quote their reality as possible, right? But the greatest writers, I'm not saying the greater, but the greatest writers that I read, and I've read all of, Tolstoy and even Chekhov, who you wouldn't think of it, or lots of, many of them. Dispatches, which was a work about the Vietnam War, is not very well known. But anyway, I can't just write it. I get bored with nonfiction, and my fiction is, there's always this nudging from, hey, wait a second, and what he's saying is, I'm taking it not to description only, but to prophecy. Now, I would never have used that word, but what I am doing is saying the danger of the isolation of all of these kinds of things, usually in medicine, but others too, and the healing power of good connection, as I said, which is mutual. And Janet Janet is the woman I was talking about. For years, we went around the world doing gender dialogues between women and men to see how we get through the impasses. And so there are two things. One is Buddhism that I took up. The two things that I really have grown into with her, she's a Buddhist teacher now, is looking at the differences in gender through connection and how to make them make better connections. And what she with her group at Wellesley started to do, and then invited me to do the male part of it, is that the usual psychological theories of health and growth were male, and they were about the self, about the I, the IU, right? What Jean Baker Miller and others at Wellesley and Janet said, no, that doesn't speak to us. We are, what they said is the relational cultural theory, which is that the health and growth psychologically of a person is the quality of their connections, the quality of their connections. It's not IU, it's we. It's we. And we went all around the world. We did 20,000 men and women, boys and girls, and we found ways to instill that. Men can use the we, but they're not rewarded for it. And so that was another huge, Janet and I decided to do two things in our lives together. We've been together a long time by that time. One was I would join her in doing a male relational psychology, which I did. We wrote a book about this called Healing Dialogues Between Women and Men. We have to talk. And then for the second thing to do together, one from each of ours, she came into my dramatic world. And we spent a long time at really the remarkable story called Bill W. and Dr. Bob about the creation of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is the most remarkable thing. And the thing where they both merged is that Bill and Bob, who were drunks, met each other, and in the meeting, it became clear that the only thing that could keep a drunk sober was sharing his story with another drunk. It's the we. It's the we. And they went together beautifully, and we finally got that up on off Broadway 3 times and stuff. It was a passion. So we did both of those things. And I guess that's answers the question. I'm just, I've gotten very, very clear now from, and I've got a couple of other books that are in all of this pretty much done. Very, very clear now that my job on earth as a writer is to do what I did as a doctor. You try to help people, and you help people, especially in the United States. If you kick them out of their self and realize that actually they would prefer to be in a good relationship, right?
Absolutely. And so important in COVID, especially when we've all been so isolated.
Oh, well, everything, right. Think about isolation.
Really, yeah, really come to the fore. I wondered, you mentioned difficulty with publishing and sticking with your passion. Is that how you've managed to stay true to yourself and your message in the face of outside pressures and pressures from publishers and criticism? How have you sort of stayed true to all of this in that?
Well, that's that in many ways there was an easy part to that, because I was naive. I thought, I'm just telling the truth with a little humor and some sex. In the early days, sex, not so much now, but I was just telling the truth. And I knew what I did. I never cared what anybody said about literally most of the books. On the other side, unfortunately, I have never had a really reputable publisher, and critics don't review, I don't. So but that's someplace else. It's hard enough to write. I don't deal with what happens after that very much, except I forgot to say this. I think, my memory is a little fuzzy. Did I talk? I did. Yes, I'm sorry. I talked about the hearing from Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, right. And I never forgot that. I live with that every day, whoever that was. I don't know who it was. And so, yes, I mean, my favorite authors are prophetic in the same way that Nathan just talked about, just described in that piece. And I am so glad in 40 some years of writing and the House of God for 41 years, no one has ever written any kind of piece about the books. So I'm delighted. I'm delighted.
No,
and
that's
his whole thing can be summed up in a simple, I don't know if you know Wallace Stevens, the poet, what he said in a great poem called The Blue Guitar. He said, things as they are changed upon the blue guitar. And that's what I do. That's what I do. And Chekhov has something like that too. He said something like that every moment has in it the sense of something else that's better.
No, absolutely. That's a wonderful answer. And I'm sure that, like the phone call that you got from Tulsa, I'm sure there were many other people that felt the same way, that just weren't able to call you directly. So I'm sure that's very much a shared experience. Coming on a little bit more to the new book, or to the one that's just been published, you said recently in an interview that it was coming back to teaching medical students at NYU that brought medicine back into focus, and that's why, nearly 40 years later, inspired you to write about the characters from the House of God again. And the laws from the House of God were, more geared to surviving internship, whereas in Man's Fourth Best, they really are sort of hopeful and inspire that bringing the human back into medicine at the Future of Medicine clinic. So without too many spoilers for those that may not have read the book, can you tell us a little bit about Man's Fourth Best and how you see the future of medicine?
Of course I do. I will. Well, this is unbelievable. I tell you, knock wood, I've had an amazing life. I can't believe it. I was out of medicine. I was writing other books. They always had doctors in them, actually, the best novel that I've written is called The Spirit of the Place, which takes place in my hometown, Hudson, New York, but it got not too much attention, won a couple of national prizes, that's it. But anyway, the flicker of the butterfly's wing. I mean, I was, I devoted myself to the Bill W. and Dr. Bob play for all those things, Rhodes, and we took it all over the country and everything, because my specialty was treating alcoholics and addicts, but I wasn't writing. I kept writing, and then one day, out of the blue, because these guys in New York had seen the play and loved it, and they all read The House of God, NYU Medical School. I got a call out of the blue. It's like 7 years ago, and a guy says, the president says, "Hey, how'd you like to be a professor at NYU Medical School?" I said, "Why? What? I'm happy. I'm in Boston. They're in New York. And he said, "We want you to teach." And I said, "What do you want me to teach?" He said, "We want you to teach the House of God." I said, "What? Nobody's ever asked me to teach the House of God. People have hated me for the House of God. Harvard hated me, and NYU is loving me to take, So I said, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll try it." And that was 7 years ago. So all of a sudden, you know how these chances come up? All of a sudden, I was back in medicine, and I'm very inquisitive. So I'm spending nights on the Bellevue emergency room, and I'm going on rounds, and I'm finding everything I can about this. So the first time I was on rounds, I noticed two things. And at the beginning of Man's Fourth Best Hospital, which is the sequel to The House of God, same characters, says, I'm called to write this novel because it was a time when medicine could either go toward more humane care or toward money and screens, which means money and money, because the screens are billing screens mostly. Now, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. I mean, I saw the miracles of medicine. I didn't know what was going on. And guess what? 7 years ago, I said, somebody's got to write about this. And I guess it's you. Hey, wait a second, because it's unjust. And so I learned everything, literally everything I could about the American healthcare system. And that turned out to be Man's Fourth Best Hospital. And the House of God was about the injustice of medical training, the brutality of medical training. Man's Fourth Best Hospital is about the whole injustice, especially to people of color, poor people and people of color, of the modern medicine system, the whole system. I had to take on the whole system. So what it's about, the major character in both books is the fat man, who is this incredible, wonderful, this wild, great character. And the story I invented, this was invented now because this didn't happen. Man's Fourth Best Hospital is this big hospital in Boston, and it's losing money and losing prestige. So they invite somebody, the fat man, who's famous because of the House of God and getting rich in Silicon Valley on a pill to make old people remember better. They said, hey, we need fame and money. Can you help? So he said, if I can do what I want. What does he want? They do whatever you want. He says, I want to have a public clinic leaning against the big tower of your hospital, and I want to show how to put the human back into medicine. And that was my task, which is not an easy task, let me tell you. And so he rounds up his people and gets on. And one of the things that I really am proud of about this book, because now it takes place in sort of now, he gets the male people. There weren't any women in the program when I was in the House of God. I wasn't a sexist. I get accused of being a sexist, book. There weren't any women there. And if they were treated as in terms of women's liberation, you know. And I've gotten, we won't go there. There's some criticism coming in that way after all these years. But, so I brought back the fat man. He brought back Eat My Dust Eddie and Hyper Hooper and Chuck and all of those people that everybody loves. And by the end of the book, there is parity of men and women in the clinic, in the fat man clinic. So I'm very happy about that. I can say, because it's a different era, different problems. And in order to, it's the same style. It rides on humor. You've read it. It rides on humor. Nobody outside of medicine will believe that it's so bad, except that they will find out why their doctor is typing with his back to you when you're trying to say something to him. It's clear, because this is worse for doctors, worse for patients, worse for the country, et cetera, and nurses and everything. So I took that on. And in the middle of the book, for instance, there's a very funny but absolutely true piece. The fat man gives a talk on the 6 rackets of American healthcare, follow the money. And it took me 2 months to understand the system, but I'm hoping this has a different effect. The House of God helped put the laws on the books for the maximum hours. I'm hoping that this has we're at a turning point now. I'm a hopeful guy that with Biden, et cetera, there's a chance that things are going to be more equitable, I think, coming up. I really think so. Anyway, you can buy it. I'm getting a lot of crap for it too, like I did for the House of God,
No, well, I mean, I think that's the nature of the writing. It's resistance. So if everyone loved it and agreed, then you wouldn't be
I'm not doing my job, right?
Absolutely. Do you think there's an achievable balance between modern technology and maintaining human connection in medicine?
I've got to tell you a funny story that when the House of God, and then remind me of this question, when the House of God was about to be published, the publisher says, come, I want you to come down to New York and talk to our lawyer. Oh, God. Who likes that kind of message, right? Not me. I get there. He says, he's there with a lawyer, both in suits. And he says, is there anyone in the House of God that's identifiable? Any characters? I said, oh shit, who isn't? I didn't know you're supposed to, my first novel, I wasn't supposed to disguise him. So I figured I'll give him one, So I said, yes, the chief of medicine. He says, how's he like him? Well, he's a kidney guy. He walks down the hallway with his stethoscope tucked into his pants, and he whistles Daisy, Daisy to go see a patient. And they go, oh God, and they have a conference and they said, well, does he have a big red birthmark on his cheek? And I said, well, no. And he said, now he does. Look up in your book, his first and only mention, he has a big red birthmark on his cheek, which is the non-liable birthmark. I just had to say that, that's the kind of thing I had to go through. Anyway, tell me again the question. I'm not sure I remember.
Oh, no, of course. No, that was a great story. But I mean, on the panel of the House of God, it seemed like all the rest of the characters were very happy to be included. So that was great. No, the question was whether or not you think in modern medicine, we could possibly find an achievable balance between technology and maintaining the human connection as medicine begins to change a bit.
In the way things are structured now in the United States, no. Doctors are absolutely at their edge. You hear of burnout. I think it's abuse. It's abuse. You have no idea how bad it is for doctors and nurses and other people who work there. And it's all because of the for-profit system. And I think what will happen and what has to happen is to basically finally get a single payer system, strap it onto Obamacare and Medicare. People love Medicare. I have Medicare. I love Medicare. You don't get rid of the supplemental insurance. You got to get rid of the incredible earnings of private health insurance. And most of the reason doctors are going crazy is because they're fighting the insurance. In man's fourth, on one side, the doctors are forced to bill them up. There's a war across the screen, and like all wars, it's about money. On one side, the doctors are on one side being forced to bill the most for the thing, and on the other side, the insurance lackey is trying to pay the least. I mean, you have no idea. You have no idea how crazy it is, and doctors are really suffering. I think it's an easy fix. It's an easy fix. I think it'll be there in the next 10 years, 5 to 10 years, and it's the VA system. See, Obama had a good idea. He created the electronic medical record back in, I think, whatever, it doesn't matter. And that was good because it helped with data. He wanted to send data. That's good. But the private insurance industry got in and attached to each piece of data a monetary value. And so that's what it is. The answer, as the fat man says toward the end of the book, he says you got to squeeze the money out of the machines, which is what the Veterans Administration, the VA in America, is that. And the reason it works, because there's none of that dickering. An appendectomy has a set billing for every place in the country. There's no arguing about it. So the answer, the Shem system, is doing what the fat man said, and just let the doctors do all the data. Let them do the data. Then they send it to the national system. And then if there's supplemental insurance, They say, oh, wow, great. Send all of the, one click, the insurance company gets all the data and they get it from the patient. You know, easy, but it'll take 10 years.
Well, yes, no, that's, I mean, you have to start somewhere. So we should all listen to the fat man. Before we move on to the question and answer session, is there any, sneak peek? COVID has been so challenging for all of us, and I was just curious if there's any sneak peeks into your new book that you wanted to share, set in COVID times and bringing all these characters together.
Yeah, let me just sum up a little bit. The new novel, yeah. I mean, what lit my fire was seeing at NYU. Well, partly my getting the COVID. Ironic. The last time I was out doing publicity appearances for Man's Fourth Best Hospital, it was in New York. It's the beginning of March last year. I went to Montefiore Hospital. It's a great hospital. It's right in the Upper Bronx, And then I also went the same trip. I went down to Brooklyn, also very impoverished, people of color, etc. There weren't really many restrictions. Just don't shake hands. That's all it was. And I came back and I caught it, gave it to my wife. She didn't like that. But luckily, the virus kind of tiptoed up to the lungs, looked in our lungs, said, nah, no. So we didn't have to go to the hospital. We were lucky, but it was miserable. So I had the experience. But I was looking for, there are two things that brought it together, like all the other things. One is how the inequality and the political stuff about not wearing masks because of Trump, and all this stuff, but the political stuff and the poverty differences. And the other thing that came along, you probably don't know this, one disaster of the for-profit healthcare system is that private equity has brought up huge chains of usually small, some big, but usually small hospitals in rural America or in small cities in America. And that happened to me, Hudson, New York. I read about that. The spirit of the place is about a doctor in Hudson, New York. And it was perfect to take that hospital as an example, because I know all about it and I know people, I know everybody there. That would be the setting the first time, one of these, small hospitals. The first thing they do when they take it over is they get rid of obstetrics. Imagine that. The people of Hudson, New York have to drive 40 miles to deliver a baby in a hospital because it's not profitable and it's dangerous, Anyway, so that's the site. And here's the beauty. I'm getting old enough, maybe I'm getting inbred or something, because what I did, Roy Bash, who is the hero of 3 of the books, House of God and Man's Fourth, was born and raised in Columbia, New York, which is Hudson, right? Because that's what I know. The other book, the other guy in The Spirit of the Place was also born and raised in Hudson, both of them Jewish, about the same ages. And so I thought, oh, terrific. I'll bring them together because they need help because of the COVID in this little hospital. All the white guys, all the white doctors leave. They don't want to have anything to do with trying to take care of poor people or whatever in this COVID. So Orville, the doctor who lives there, calls up his dear friend, Roy Bash of the House of God and Man's Fourth, says, can you help? Can you come? And the circumstances are such that it turns out that it would work. So I have the people from The Spirit of the Place, and the hero is his niece, Amy, a young woman hero that he has tutored as a doctor. And we bring in Hyper Hooper and Eat Dustedi and Roy and Barry. So I'm bringing these two parts of my life together. Now the books are different styles, but I'm sort of edging toward, I don't know, I'm amalgamating them. So that's the big deal. Let me say, I'll close because I was thinking, I think you asked one thing. A final question. Are you going to ask me that?
Yes, no, it was just before we end off, just to close, is, for the current scholars in residence on the call, even if we were the students in your class, it was just what would be the message that you would leave with? Yeah.
Well, I racked my brain and I had a few things that are in the books usually. Listen for those, hey, wait a second moments to take action. Not alone, but with caring others. That's number one. Number two, the danger of isolation and the healing power of good mutual connection. And then last is something that I actually wrote in one of these books. You can find it. It's about suffering. We don't really talk, even in healthcare or medicine, we don't talk about suffering. How many doctors have you had say, what are you suffering, or how's your suffering? It's a whole different thing. I don't know quite what we don't. But the issue is suffering is inevitable. Everybody's going to suffer. It can be big suffering, it can be little suffering. The question is how we walk through it, right? If we try to walk through it alone, standing tall, being tough, this is mostly the male. If we try to walk through our suffering alone, we're going to suffer more and we're going to spread more suffering around. On the other hand, if we walk through suffering with others, caring others, and that's where doctors come in, our healthcare workers come in. These are our job at the worst possible times of people's life. This is our job. So we are the caring others. So if you walk through, and we have to do it ourselves, but if you walk through suffering with caring others, you won't suffer as much and you won't spread as much suffering around. And you may even be, I don't know what the word would be, redeemed, enlightened, full of grace. That's it. Stay in connection.
Thank you so much. That's a wonderful ending to really a wonderful discussion. So now, if you're happy, we'll move on to the question and answer. The way this will work is if you would like to add a question to the chat, I will read the question out. If you would like to ask the question yourself, you can raise your hand and then you can just turn on your camera and your microphone and you're more than welcome to ask your question yourself. But I will kick off with a question that's already been added to the chat, which is how and why did you pick the name Samuel Shem?
I think it picked me. Who are you, or I should say, who are you talking to?
That's the question.
I don't know if it was the most brilliant thing I did or the stupidest thing I did. I did it for a stupid reason. Came from another psychiatrist who I pilloried in the novel Mount Misery. That's the one about my psychiatric training. Roy's psychiatric training. God, why am I forgetting things today? Must be tired. Give me it again.
How and why you chose the pen name Samuel?
Oh, right. Yeah, obviously I don't want to talk about it. No, it's one of these psychoanalytic types said, he knew I was publishing this book, and he said, oh, you don't want to take your real name because then your patients could know about you. I'm like, oh, like they don't? I mean, it's stupid. But I was in the thrall of these people for a couple of years, So I took the name, and I'll tell you why. Well, the name is, in Hebrew, the name Shem is name, so that seemed to fit. And also in in Finnegan's Wake, Shem is the penman and Sean Shem is the writer. And there's also the Baal Shem Tov, which was a Hasidic spell that was kind of cool in Poland in the old days. So I took that, and guess what? My patients all found out almost immediately. You can't hide that. And then it became popular, and everybody found out. But they would. I was warned. Oh, we're really going to give you a hard. They came in and say, "Oh, you wrote that book, and it's sexy, and blah 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 blah." That would take 30 seconds, right? And then they say, "Oh, you should have seen what my mother told me the other day." They don't care. But I was stuck with it. And now I like it. Actually, I'll tell you a little story. I've been to Australia several times, and the last time I was there, actually, I was giving a talk at a convention in Brisbane, and and it was announced Dylan had won the Nobel Prize for literature, and I just loved it. Dylan was our man, 60s. He was it. I mean, he was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, still wonderful. The next morning, I was on like an NPR national radio show, and the guy was playing Dylan. I was very moved, actually, very moved when he got that. And I sat down and I said, I heard you playing Dylan. Do you mind if I tell you about? I love Dylan. Do you mind if I tell you my favorite song? And it's a song called "Up to Me." It's not very popular, not known too well. And then he looked at me, and he knew my work. This guy, he'd done his homework, and he said, "Well, you're sort of the Dylan of medicine." So I took a long walk around. It's called Kangaroo Bay or something in Brisbane. And by the time I got back, I said, damn it, I'm going to be Shem. I'm going to have people call me Shem. He calls Dylan, I'll be Shem. I like Shem. I really do now. It's easy to spell too. I like the way people have really taken it up. It's easy.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Does anyone want to ask a question? We had some sent in advance, but I'll mix those in. Is there anyone that would like to add something else to the chat or ask a question directly?
Weren't there a couple that people sent in before?
There were, yes. I just wanted to give the audience a chance before I jumped into those, but while they're thinking of their questions, I'll go to the ones that were sent in advance. So the first one was sent in by Oscar Lyons, who's one of my fellow 2016 scholars. And you've already alluded a bit to how the response to the House of God changed from when you wrote it to now. But he also wondered, how do you feel your writing's changed? Do you feel your writing itself has changed since then?
That's a very good question. Well, the motivation has not changed, as I've described in detail. I wish I could say it's become easier, but it's not necessarily, although I did write Mansforth quite readily. There are a couple of books that are waiting to be published that aren't like, that are like the spirit of the place. There's actually, forgive my grandiosity. There's another sort of 3 books, a trilogy, and one of them is the spirit of the place that's already out there, but one of them is set in 1954 Guatemala with the first coup of a country, basically, and then the other one is something that deals with the post-2001 thing that happened in Hudson, New York, in my Columbia, because I get the paper, I know all about it, about a Pakistani who had won the lottery to get to, of all places, Hudson, who was delivering pizzas, got picked up as a terrorist just after 2001. It's a true story. But what it really was about, in addition, was I did a gig for maybe almost 10 years in a biotech venture capital company. And I always have felt as a Jew, even though I'm a Buddhist, not a practicing Jew now, I had always felt that a Jewish writer has to write about the Holocaust once. And this was the only way I could do it because it was a German company and it was a German leader, and it's about evil, but it's not the evil you would assume. So those are hopefully going to get published. I think I think I've learned how to really write different styles. I mean, writing Bill W. and Dr. Bob, I mean, writing a play is nothing like writing a novel. And I seem to have the ability to be plastic, or malleable, because there are a lot of these things in a way I can pick one, like a novel that's been published but nobody reads is called At the Heart of the Universe. And actually, this is a good example of that, because when we adopted our daughter from China, it's this marvelous, marvelous thing. And then when we went back to her orphanage and the police station where she was deposited, something happened when she was 10 that made me think, maybe there's a way the birth mother would want to try to find her daughter after 10 years. And so I wrote this book that's set in China, and it's about, it's a WASP family, which is different. And it's probably the hardest book I ever wrote, because but it may be one of the best. I think I've become, forgive me, and I've had some, I remember I was writing for MD magazine. You probably didn't know about MD mag. It was a big glossy one years ago. And they thought I was funny because of the House of Gods. They always made me be funny in these different things I wrote for them. They'd assign me. Once he assigned me do the Hippocratic Oath. I said, what? You want me to write something about the Hippocratic Oath? What, are you crazy? Have you ever seen the Hippocratic Oath? It's not funny. So do it. I did it. It was pretty fun. I think the big deal is, for me now, is just the nuts and bolts. I'm very creative. I'm sort of almost half the way through another novel, this novel that's set in the COVID. And I'm having a hell of a wonderful time. But as you can see, I get, memory lapses and stuff like that. It's harder when you get older. And my arthritis and vision, I'm thinking about that stuff, not about the book, and I don't remember what I did two chapters back, it's kind of funny. But on the other hand, I think I can honestly say, after I don't know how many books and plays and some nonfiction, I know how to do it. But it doesn't, and frankly, if you're not on the edge, you're not writing well. You have to like every day. I mean, how can you, being on the edge, how can you sit down with Shakespeare on the shelf, or Chekhov, or God, Tolstoy, But the thing is, if anybody wants to write, I don't know about this group, there's only one. I made this look rosy. It hasn't been rosy in a lot of ways in my life. I haven't talked about them. For instance, drunk going down the what is the road between Oxford and Stratford?
Oh, now you're testing my geography, and I don't know.
Somebody would know, but there's a road that goes like this between Oxford and Stratford. And I decided, I was drinking an awful lot then, living out in the country alone, and I decided one Sunday morning, I was going to take this. The guy had lent me a BMW motorcycle, a big one, for the summer. And I decided for some reason that I was going to go 100 miles an hour on this road. And it's up and down the Cotswolds like this. So I figured I got to the top of one, I could do it. I got on this big motorcycle, one of the kind when it falls over, you can't pick it up. I got on it. And this is the weird part. I had been drinking a little more in the morning because I had been drunk the night before. And I was wearing, which is what I was wearing was the interesting part, a pair of bathing suits, a pair of bathing trunks. That was it. No socks, no shoes, no top, no nothing. I get on the thing, the BMW, I think a 650, and it's Sunday. People are going both this ways. It's, you know, it's like it's a 2.5 lane road. And I get to the top and I said, okay, let's go. And I went, did it as fast as I can, went down the middle between these cars. And then looked at the odometer. Yes, I'd hit 1 million. I hit 100. And I just coasted up and went back. Didn't think much of it. I mean, come on. I mean, I've been lucky. And I did, after I think it was probably maybe the first novel. Yeah, writing the second novel, which was called Fine, which, you know, doesn't really do too much. My wife says you spent a year in the bathtub just wondering what you're going to do. I mean, I asked myself a question because it was a hard thing writing. I already had a hard job as a psychiatrist. And I tried to figure what was the reason to write, why to write if you don't enjoy it. And I came up with one simple thing. I remember the day I did, is that because you can't not. Simple as that. You know, whatever that means. And then you know, it took quite a long time after that to follow Janet into her Buddhist teacher, who was this wonderful activist and Buddhist teacher in India, meditation teacher. And that in one early talk, it just revised how I looked at the world. So that's been helpful. It's hard. It's hard. I don't think, you know, I can't take writing not seriously because I already had a serious job, you know, and I needed another one, I guess.
No, that's a powerful answer. Thank you very much. There is another question in the chat, which is from Marina Hughes, who says, thank you for a great discussion. I'd like to know if you feel so strongly about publicly funded medicine, what made you leave the UK? Was there ever a point in which you wanted to work in the UK?
Well, well, as I said, I thought of staying in the UK, but I couldn't. I either had to, well, I could have, you know, I could have left my American citizenship, you know, but otherwise I was going to Vietnam or Harvard. So I wasn't sick very much in Oxford, but I was amazed at the National Health Service. You know, I did a couple of tours in England in the last, I don't know, 10 years, 5 years even. And I was here when they were talking about how the NIH was getting privatized in various different ways, and somebody from United Insurance had been given a spot in the cabinet or something, or in the government of the National Health Service, something like that. And everybody was way up in arms about that. And I found that very difficult to believe, because what a gift, what a gift. I mean, it showed you how you can just, you know, you don't have to mess with all this insurance stuff. Yeah, so I couldn't stay, but it was a good model. I don't know, is it still being threatened with being privatized more or not?
I think in some different capacities, there's an element of privatization, but largely is still public at the moment.
And you know, I've been to Australia several times and stuff, and that's a great system too. And there are only two systems that are pretty good with healthcare, that have private healthcare. I think there's Switzerland and Holland. And I went and I spoke at Holland. I was giving a talk in Holland, you know, at a hospital there. I don't remember which one. And he said, oh, I can't come. The president couldn't come. Oh, because the United Insurance Company is seeing about maybe, coming into this field and insuring here. I said, okay, that's too bad. Then he showed up, the administrator. So I thought you couldn't come. He said, the guy came here, he spent an hour and he looked at how much money we can make. He said, this isn't worth our time. I can't make any money here. And he flew back. It's all about regulation. It really is. The figures are horrible in the United States. And Australia is terrific. I've spoken there quite a lot, and I was very impressed there. You gotta squeeze the money out of the machines. It's as simple as that. Simple.
So there's a question that was sent in advance that's somewhat related also to the NHS, and where it asked that in the NHS, there's increased efficiency, decreased continuity, and more automation all erode the human part of our patient contact. And this is from Mariana Hughes, Western Australia, in Magdalen, 1990, who then asked, in our immediate and larger medical systems, where and how do we draw the line? So I think you've already answered this somewhat previously, but do you have anything else that you want to add about where we as doctors can draw the line?
All right, control the line. How would you translate control the line?
So so sort of in the medical systems, where would you say if enough is enough in terms of the demand for increased efficiency and for automation of medical care? She's asking where and how you would say enough is enough.
Well, I think I and lots and lots and lots of Americans know it's not enough. What I use as a example is before COVID, if you went to a play, say, and somebody fell down on the stage and like dying or something, does the shout go up? Is there an insurance executive in the house? No. I mean, simply put, we're the workers. We do the work. Without us, no healthcare. And it's so sad. We could have stopped this and nipped this in the bud, but we didn't. Look at the difference between nurses and doctors, right? We don't get together. We just don't get together. As I said, as that little thing about the falling down, if we got together, the country couldn't last a day without us, right? Even if a third of us did. Nurses who have a very strong union nationwide, very strong union, almost always win what they want. They almost always get what they want. There was a thing here about 2 years ago, I think, and the Brigham, the Brigham Hospital, Harvard Hospital, didn't want to increase the pay and stuff for nurses. So they sort of tried to they tried to get it done. It couldn't get done. The Sunday before the Monday that they were supposed to walk out, the mayor settled it, and the nurses got almost everything they wanted. 2 days later, in the paper, the Boston paper front page was Brigham Hospital spent $22 million to make sure they would have nurses on board. I mean, that's the power they have. It's the power. I think, as I said, I think eventually we'll get to a much better place here. But doctors, I mean, what we need is doctors, nurses, patients, and others to form a group, right? That's power, not doctors alone. It's very, very sad. I mean, I don't know if you know how bad doctors are getting it now. you know, as I said, they have quote burnout, but I think it's abuse. They just can't, they just don't want to work in it anymore. You don't know the half of it.
Well, I guess that's the last law of man's fourth best, stick together no matter what. So I guess we need to learn that lesson. Okay, another question from Michael Chan in the chat is asking if you think artificial intelligence and what role that will play in the future of medicine. So artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say something stupid. Intelligence is always artificial. You know, what's not artificial is human beings. I mean, I'm being cute, but I think that's true. I don't know much about it. I think that we have gone so overboard with the electronic record that's joined to money. I mean, don't get me wrong. Wonderful, wonderful things have happened in medicine, including the COVID. My God, you know. And medicine can do a hell of a lot of things that machines are helping with. I think artificial intelligence would be fine to try and all of that stuff, as long as not it's somehow linked. It's not, you don't link it to payment. You don't link it to payment.
There's then another question, Chip Filson. Well, it just says telemedicine and humanity and medicine. So I'm not sure if you'd like to elaborate on the question, if you'd like to turn your mic on and elaborate, or it just says telemedicine and humanity and medicine.
Elaborate on humanity and medicine?
And the use of telemedicine.
Telemedicine, yeah. Chip. Hi, Chip's in my class, and he's in my what, monthly group, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it, Chip. Chip is a dear old friend, old and friend. God, tell me the end of the question again. Go ahead, Chip. You don't.
Yeah, telemedicine, I found that I get quicker and sometimes better diagnosis when you can connect with a doctor via telemedicine. And I'm wondering if that, in your view, is a way that some of the humanity can be easier dispensed, because even getting an appointment with a specialist in a field might take you 2 or 3 months now.
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a wonderful use of Zoom and all of that stuff. I mean, I think it is certainly more humane for you not to be, you know, just trying to get an appointment, or not being able to go in. I think we are learning good lessons for the use of telemedicine now with COVID. I really do. I think I would applaud that. The question is, where does it stop? I mean, what people want from their doctor is not just intelligence. It's been shown in so many different ways that human connection is healing. It really is. There's been so many studies that have done this, that, you know, real face-to-face, person-to-person. That doesn't mean you can't do a lot of this. I'm all for it. I really am all for it. To communicate, put it that way. I think communication gets much easier. The real, quote, end of suffering is hard to see how you deal with that, you know. So that's a good point. I'm with you on a lot of that, sure. It's much more efficient too. Yeah. The issue over and over again isn't some of these things we're talking about. It's the money. It's the money, because the doctor is going to have to, click all the boxes of if he wants to get paid on that thing that he's seen with you in Zoom. It's as simple as that. In a national healthcare system, much simpler. He's not going to be, he or she is not going to be figuring out, well, what can I bill for? What can I bill here? They're getting me to bill the max, and you know what I mean? It's that part that distorts it. Because then you do it because it's better for the patient, not because somebody's saying make more money on it.
Mm-hmm.
Great. So is there any last burn? We've actually reached perfect timing. Any last burning questions from anyone in the audience before we make some closing remarks?
Andrew Judge, you?
Andrew, yes.
Just a comment on the conversation so far. It's also an endorsement of having years of good connections and the experience that comes with it, because you must be getting close to 80. That's a lot of experience. And I think that also has part to play, and that your useful years aren't over when you're 65. Any thoughts on that one?
I'm sorry, was that a question?
Well, it was a question about age and experience. So the fact that you've accumulated a lot of wisdom, which has been an important part of your connection, your good connections, history of good connections. Also working through your the bad issues and reflecting on that. So it's really an endorsement of experience and wisdom, which is tends not to be opposite from just intelligence.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and as you know, you're a physician too?
No, I'm a minister of
Oh,
religion.
good for you. Yeah, I mean, what's life for? I mean, life is just living on the edge, I think, in whatever your edge is, and not thinking you're the show. What I've learned, I mean, I've been in AA for a long time, and it has to do with having some kind of, the guys the two men, Bill and Bob, who founded AA, were geniuses in a way, and they said that alcoholism is a disease of physical, psychological, and spiritual forces, and you have to treat them all for success. And that was the start of the holistic movement in Akron, Ohio in 1935 in America. And the third part, the spiritual contact, is just as important as any. And I think, we're of an age where if you're walking around life without any kind of sense of what we call spiritual, greater than you, you're going to have some troubles. You're going to suffer more, as I said.
Great. Did I miss anyone else? Okay, fantastic. Well, then I'll just, as this comes to an end, I think I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you for the wonderful questions. And then, of course, thank you to Shem. It's been an absolute honor, absolute honor connecting with you in preparing for this event and being able to be part of this tonight. And I just want to thank you for your time and for sharing with us so openly this evening. And I'll hand over to Elizabeth, who I'm sure will also want to say a few words before we end the Zoom call.
Thank you so much, Shem. Thank you, Romina, for your wonderful moderation of this event, and Shem for sharing in such a vivid and nuanced way your life's journey, the impact of Oxford, the life of a writer, of a writer as a resistor and activist, and just all of the wonderful ways in which you have stood up for the world, as we say, fought the world's fight. We're very proud that you are a scholar, and so grateful that you shared your experiences so generously with us today. And I also want to thank everybody for joining us, and for I hope that we can continue this conversation about how we can foster deep human connections and foster humanity in medicine and in all the professions. That it is such an important part of what we need to do in the world today. So thank you all so much. And by the way, before the event, Shem said that he was delighted to consider other ways to be connected with the Rhodes community. And so I especially want to say that to the scholars in residence, that if you have ideas or thoughts or questions and want to continue the dialogue, that you are most encouraged to do so. So get in touch with Romina, because she knows how to get in touch with Shem. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.